Okay, we'll call the meeting to order Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021, special meeting of the Board of Education. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call vote. Shelley is absent tonight. Attest to publication.
I saw it posted.
Thank you, Joni. Approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Lori, seconded by Joni to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Presentation for the 2022-25 operating referendum. Mr. Lane will do a presentation and we will take questions when he has completed the presentation. Mr. Lane.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So I want to welcome you tonight to our referendum meeting for those of you that are here in person and for those of you that are watching on YouTube. As Julie said, later on, we will, at the end of the presentation, take questions. John, next slide, please. So I want to let you know that you can find more referendum information on our website. And there will also be tomorrow the PowerPoint that we're using tonight and also a recording of the YouTube. So there's going to be a lot of information tonight. And so if you miss something, please refer to those tomorrow. And again, I'm going to encourage you to give me a call at school, email with any questions that you may have that will help you make a decision on the referendum. Next, please, John. So what are we asking for? We are coming to you a year early. Because there is no general election in November 2021, we are running it in April. In years past, we would run it on the year that the 3-year referendum expires. And again, that would have been 2021. But because of no general election this year, we are running it at this time. What that will allow is if the referendum doesn't pass, next year will allow the board, if they so choose, to come back in either the February primary or the April general election to run the referendum again if they choose. The second bullet point I want to emphasize, this is a non-recurring operating referendum. What that means is it is for a specified time period. In our case, it ends after 3 years. And I also bolded the word operating. There are two different types of referendums. There are debt levy referendums, which we have had in the past to build in the middle school, high school, to renovate the elementary, to do the knockdown of the old school. That is debt levy. This is operating, and this simply means it is for the day-to-day operation of the district. So this non-recurring referendum would run for 3 years, and it would begin in 2022-23 school year. And so we are asking for $900,000 each of those 3 years. Now, those amounts are very, very similar to what the previous two referendums in 1619 and 1922, when we asked for 800 the first year and second year and 900 third year. The increase obviously is due to increases in expenses. Next, John. So the money will be used to maintain the current programming services for students. It will also be used to maintain current staffing and support programs and offerings for our kids. It will also be to maintain and be proactive in our taking care of our beautiful facilities. We're so fortunate in this community to have the facilities that we do. So it would be used to maintain and refresh those facilities. And also continued upgrades to security. We were very fortunate in the past referendum years to receive grants. But if there are additional security measures out there, obviously we want to continue to use not only grant money, but referendum money to make sure our kids and staff are the safest they can be. Next, please. So I do want to point out, these are some of the things that the 1922 referendum paid for. And it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but it is the highlights of where the money was spent. We are so fortunate in this district to have small class sizes. And this referendum, that referendum allowed us to do that. It also allowed us to have offerings in family and consumer education, technology education, and agriculture. If we would not have referendum money, we could not have full-time programs in those areas. So again, thanks to our community for that support. As I said, upgrades in our security. As I said, we did receive grant money for it, but there were other pieces of it that were paid by the referendum money. Facilities, we were able to upgrade our playground to make it accessible for all of our students. We were able to renovate our elementary library media center. We were allowed to, with this money, to look at an energy lease for LED lighting, and that was installed in all 3 buildings. And then technology, again, so fortunate that our students are able to have one-on-one iPads. Next. So what will the 22-25 referendum pay for? I want to highlight small class sizes again at the elementary. So we have a 3rd section of 4-year-old kindergarten, 3rd section of 5-year-old kindergarten, 3rd section of 1st grade. And it also allows us to keep smaller class size in grades 3 through 5. Now, when I talk about smaller class sizes in those grades, if we are able to get into that 20 range or smaller in grades 3, 4, 5, that is definitely an advantage. Now, there are sometimes that in those grades, especially, it may fluctuate a little bit, but if we're able to maintain those class sizes, that's advantageous, obviously, for our kids. Middle school, high school class sizes, we want to try to, as much in the core areas of math, science, English, et cetera, keep the class sizes small. So we will look at staffing in the middle school, high school in order to do that. And again, but that will be dependent on the support of the referendum. As I said, full-time offerings. A lot of times in a small school, the positions are very frankly combined. So for example, in family and consumer education, either if we didn't have the referendum money, it would either be a part-time position or not a program that we could offer. Same thing in technology education. And the difficulty is when it's not full-time, then you're not going to retain kids and you're not going to retain staff if you don't have a full-time program. Next, please, John. Continuing on with the middle school offerings, full-time agriculture. Again, back 10, 11, 12 years ago when we cut ag to part-time, that was not good for the district. It was something that had to be done at that time, obviously, but since we've been able to make the program full-time and it's a great program, but again, keeping it full-time is essential. Full-time band and full-time choir. This goes to my point about in small schools, again, if budgets are tight, many times band and choir is staffed by one person. And that's difficult, number one, because of the fact you don't have a lot of people that are certified in both areas. I mean, that's few and far between. But the ability to have a full-time band program with a full-time instructor is huge to promote the arts. Same thing with choir. So we are fortunate, again, because of our community support to be able to do that. Again, we will look at, as I mentioned before, continued upgrades and security. Facilities, we've got some things that we need to look at. Our sidewalk repair, we've been putting this off. We need to look at, and when I talk about that in front of the middle school, high school, especially. K-12 flooring, the reason that's there is it's hard to believe, but this building is 23 years old. Our elementary was built in 1967. Now we did the renovation in 2007, but that means that it's 14 years old. And so a lot of the flooring is being replaced in different areas. And minor remodels as things become available. And then Fund 46, our district created Fund 46, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. What that does is if we have a good budget year, and when I say good budget year, a lot of times we're talking about the utilities area. So if we've had good heating, cooling, where Angie, my business manager, who is, by the way, on Zoom tonight, when we look at developing the budget, we use historical information. And so in utilities, especially if we have a mild winter, those or when the energy is lower than we originally had forecasted. So that money or other monies can be transferred from Fund 10 to Fund 46. Fund 46, the good thing about that is it's solely for capital projects, maintenance, but it's also aidable, because if you don't put it in that fund and you don't spend it, it's not aidable. So we will continue to look at Fund 46 because there are certain areas at some point we will have to look at the roof at the middle school, high school. And so if we can bit by bit put money away and address it through that, that would be fantastic. And as I said, technology, we just signed a 3-year lease for one-on-one iPads for all of our students. And again, thank you to our community for that support. So why are we in the situation that we're in? So I'm going to go through some historical information, and because it's important to understand that in terms of school financing, it really hasn't changed a lot since back when I'm talking about 1993. So revenue caps were put in place in 1993. There were also a couple other pieces to that. But revenue limits basically said that every public school in the state of Wisconsin would be, there would be a cap on the revenue based on your enrollment. Most of it's enrollment, some of it's spending, but mostly enrollments. So at the same time, the state said to give tax relief, that they would fund schools, public schools, at 2/3 funding. So that has changed, and there will be a slide that'll show that, highlight that later on. So our expenses and our revenues do not match, and again, because of the revenues situations not changing at the state level. Increases in per pupil aid have been sporadic. We're fortunate these last biennium budget was a good one for the schools in the state of Wisconsin in terms of per pupil aid. But we do not know what the next biennium budget will look like in terms of per pupil aid. We hope it's positive, but we don't know at this point. And then finally, growing reliance on property taxes to fund schools. You will see, again, that has bared out, and again, not just our district, it's across the state for public schools in Wisconsin. So the revenue limits, why are they so important? Well, it basically runs our school district, all school districts. And again, as I said, all public schools are under that. And remember, I said that originally they promised 2/3 funding. So revenue limits is a combination of your, if you look at the last bullet point, combination of your state aid and your local tax levy. Obviously, the more state aid you get, that lowers the tax levy. So again, that's based on student enrollment. So when they change the funding from 2/3, and you'll see later on what the percentages are now, that means that there's more reliance on the local tax levy. Next one. So a lot of numbers in front of you. I'm going to ask you though to concentrate on the bolded ones. So looking back historically for Bangor, in 2008, 2009, our revenue limit at that point was 5.9 million. That year, we received 4.7 million in state aid. That's 79% of our revenue limit. So the other 21% was local levy. So, but if, as you look in the succeeding years, what happened? The percent of state aid or the amount of state aid decreased. And correspondingly, the local tax levy increased. So if you look at this current year and in 2020-21, our revenue limit's 6.8 million. Our state aid is 4.2 million. So that, when you look at the mixture, is 63% state aid and 37% local tax levy. So if you, again, compare it to 2008-9. So I have a slide later on that shows you what that means in terms of dollars. So, but that is very, very important to keep in mind when we talk about why the needs for referendum. Next, John. Also, another finance term is mill rate. You can call it levy rate. The terms that are most commonly referred to, mill rate, levy rate. And is your tax rate per $1,000 of property. So in terms of your total school tax, what you do is take the mill rate, and you can see the mill rates for the corresponding years back all the way to 92, 93, times at 100, because we're, for simple math, we're using $100,000 worth of property. And that'll give your total school tax. So if you look at 92, 93, the mill rate was actually 18.38. So if you had $100,000 worth of property at that time, your school tax was $1,838. So that was the reason that the state at that time, in order to alleviate the reliance on tax or local levies, promised the 2/3 funding. So basically through the years, it got better in terms of the mill rate. So if you look at the mill rates corresponding 2008, 2009, I won't go through all of them, but I do want to point out that the reason that it jumped in 12, 13, 15, 16 is because a combination of we were getting less state aid, we had declining enrollments, so those had a big impact. But you see, starting in 2018, 19, our mill rate decreasing. Couple reasons for that. The biggest one is we started to pay off debt. So our middle school, high school that was built, again, 23 years ago, was paid off. Then also, soon after that, in fact, this last year, when I'll call it, not that I use the word knockdown of the old school, but again, I commend the board for renovating it in the sense where it's an awesome facility, mainly used obviously for sports, but the foresight to do that and have three facilities with gyms, again, awesome job for the board deciding that at that time. So you can see in when we paid that debt off, again, some lowered mill rate. So 2021, it dipped to 9.74. And you'll see later on that the mill rate is projected to go lower. Now, I do want to point out that the only thing that the school can control in terms, they can control the mill rate, okay? We do not control property valuation. That is a municipality thing. So obviously, if your property value is increased and the mill rate, though, from our end stayed the same, you're going to pay more because the property valuation increased. Next. So what has changed and why the need for the referendum? So what I want to point out is the look at the 2/3 funding. Again, if you look at 2008-9, where there was roughly a $6 million revenue limit, and at that point, 79% of that revenue limit, remember I said that revenue limit is composed of state aid and local tax levy. So back in 2008-9, our state aid was 4.7 million. So then if we go to 2020, it dipped to 63%, which is 4.2 million. So that second bullet point underneath, if the 79% rate had been applied in 2021-22, we would have had $1 million more in state aid. So what that says is we wouldn't be coming to a referendum if those types of state aids were still in place. Bullet point under that, since 2009, we've averaged approximately $500,000 to $900,000 less in state aid compared to our peak back in 2008-9. I do want to point out that when we talk about referendums and if they don't pass, that the difficulty is our wants and our needs for our students and parents don't change. They still want what's best for their children. Also, if we look at cuts, expanded open enrollment. Remember, open enrollment a number of years ago was just February through April. Now it is basically year-round. So if a parent is not happy with offerings, classes, they can open enroll at any time. Last bullet point, increasing schooling options and competition. There's lots more options out there for students and families. And the competition, I mean, and not only between other entities, but even between public schools is happening. So those things I want you to keep in mind. Next. This is budget data from 2008 to 21. And basically, if you look to the right, the blue is the revenue limit. The red is certified aid and green is the total levy. So if you look at the revenue limit has increased, but if you look at our certified aid, which is state aid, you can see back in 2008-9, it was up here and basically it's went down and then kind of plateaued, even though our expenses have increased. So that's why we pay more of, the local levy takes care of more of school operating than in the past. Next, John. So I do want to point out we're not alone, unfortunately. We have roughly 420 public school districts in the state of Wisconsin. And I do put that first point, 2001, 2006. The reason is I wanted to give you some history. So back then, over 350 districts ran referendums to exceed the revenue cap over that 6-year period. And that's when the 2/3 funding really started to disappear. So districts had the choice that either they made substantial cuts or they went to their public for referendum. So you can see that started right after 2/3 funding was cut. Then if you look at the next years, the most recently. So in 2016-17, 114 districts had referendums. And by the way, I do want to point out that there are two types of referendums. There are non-recurring, which we've always run, but there's also recurring, which some districts do those. Recurring simply means that once it's approved, it stays there forever. Again, that's not ours, but so this is a combination of those. And I think it's important because it just shows that whichever referendum the community will support, the districts need that support in terms of referendum. So in 16-17, as I said, 114. Now, the reason I put no fall election is every odd year, then we don't have a general election in November. So that's why we're in the situation that we are. The other thing that happens is, again, state, and again, I'm trying to think 3-4 years ago, it used to be that you could run a special election for referendums. They did away with that. So now it is limited to either primary or general election. So when you can't run one in the fall, as in those years, you're going to see districts. That's why the less number of districts do it, because they don't have as many opportunities. So 2018-19, 100 districts, 106 districts had referendums. In 2020-21, so 62 last year, And then we have 34 districts that will go to referendum on April 6th. So if you add those numbers together, you're talking almost, well, approximately 300 districts in those years. And again, remember I said that we have 420 districts in the state. So the vast majority have run something in order to address the revenue shortfall. John? Oh, sorry that when I transposed it. It's out of line right there. So declining enrollment trends, I am happy to report that enrollment, it has been steadying and has been getting better. But I do want you to notice that back in 2002-03, that our enrollment, our membership was 693. So after that, basically it started to declining enrollments for the last 10, 12 years. But as I said, I'm happy to report over the last 3-4 years, we've been in that neighborhood of 600. And I really believe that with the building going on, with the developments, that you're going to see positive numbers in terms of our enrollment going forward. And so that is positive news, because as you know, with revenue limits, if you have declining enrollment, especially they do what's called a 3-year rolling average. And if you consistently have those declining numbers, it hurts districts. So next one. So when I present the information, the forecast model is what we call it. We use and have used for lots of years, Baird Company out of Milwaukee. They advise a lot of districts in the state of Wisconsin, and we've worked with them for a number of years. So this model, what we do is Angie, again, my Whitaker, my business manager, gives them historical data from years past, revenues and expenditures. And then using that information, it forecasts out what type of revenues and expenditures you're looking at. So in this model that we use, we assume that the valuation growth will be at the state levels. Now, we've been very fortunate that ours has been higher, but we use that, the state level. One of the things that you will hear me say, a lot of this is very conservative. And the reason we do that, I would rather be surprised in terms of enrollment, all of those things on the positive side, but we keep them very conservative. We assume enrollment growth will be flat. So when we put it in this model, even though I think the numbers will increase, we kept it at a flat level. We assume the state aid will be at the levels currently. Again, we don't know that, but we're hoping. Per pupil increases. We put it at 0. So the last two years in the biennium, they were actually at a little over $200. And we're hopeful that the biennium budget will be kind to the school district again, but we don't know that. And so we put 0 in for per pupil increase. And then we base our information on current staffing levels. We don't put in that we anticipate we're going to add this. And then we also, as I mentioned, use the historical data from years past. So again, work with a lot of school districts, and when school districts are considering going to referendum, and not just for operating referendums, for debt to build facilities and everything, they use this model. So John, next. So based on that information that I just said with the Baird forecast model, if the referendum were not to pass, the first year, 22-23, the forecast model said we would have a $900,000 deficit. 23-24, a $1 billion deficit, and then 24-25, 1.2 million. So the total would be 3.1 million. So obviously very concerning if the referendum were not to pass. Then if the referendum were to pass, at the 900 per year for 3 years. The first year is a little bit of a deficit. The second year, a little bit more. And then obviously last year, a little bit more. We really feel strongly that Angie and obviously the new superintendent with board direction will be able to look at these numbers and do some things to address the deficit, even with the referendum. Secondly, I will say that we're very fortunate that our fund balance is healthy. So if you would have to dip into it 1 year in order to balance a budget, you could. But it's not something that I recommend doing over and over. So next, John. So the forecast model in school districts, not just ours, that 75 to 80% of operating costs are tied to staffing. And that's, I don't care if it's here, I don't care if it's Holman, I don't care if it's Toma. That holds pretty true for any district. Also, it's concerning that in terms of staffing, and you've heard this from me if you listen to other board meetings, we have a shortage of teachers in many curricular areas. That's the reality. My third bullet point up, over the last 5 years, for a variety of reasons, people are choosing at lesser rates to go into education. So 30% basically, fewer percent are entering education programs. And then one of the things that drives costs is there is increased competition for fewer teachers. There are certain areas that you're very fortunate, especially at a middle school, high school areas, that if you can get 2, 3, 4 teachers, you're very fortunate. It's just the reality now. So our projected costs, now this is with a 2% salary, and that's what we've done historically, and then 8% health insurance. So forecasting those out over the 3-year period, the first year, 2% salary increase would be $78,000, health insurance $56,000, 23-24, $80,000 in salary, $60,000 in health insurance, and 24-25, $82,000 in salary and $65,000 in health insurance. So again, because of the tightened labor market, it's just very, very difficult to be able to keep and retain if we're not offering salary and benefits that are competitive with other districts. Next one. So again, going back to our mill rate, as I said, it's per $1,000 of property valuation. Our current mill rate is 9.74. By the way, I forgot to erase that. Angie and I were doing the math on that, so the rates are right. So I just forgot to erase that on my PowerPoint. So when we talk about the levy, the property or the local tax levy, there's 2 components of it. There's the operational levy, which again is the day-to-day things. So this current year, out of our 9.74 total mill rate, 7.83 was operational. So we levied a little over $2.5 million. Our building debt levy, now I should point this out, we are very fortunate. Our only remaining debt at this point is the renovation of our elementary, which was done in 2007. And it will be paid off in 2027. Now the board, again, a lot of foresight on their part, has been talking about trying to pay that debt down sooner. And so we actually levied some additional dollars to address that. So the building debt levy is $1.91, and the total levy was $625,200. So our total mill levy was 9.74, and our total levy for the current 2021 school year is $3,177,317. Again, the reason I want to show these things to you is that We're going to talk about mill rate in a little bit, forecasted ones out. Next, John, please. So what is the impact of a $900,000 referendum for the next 3 years? And I say next, I'm beginning in 22, 23. Now, again, this is where we're at currently, the 9.74. So in 22, 23, again, based on the Baird model, our mill rate would drop to 9.56, remember, from 9.74. So that would be actually be an $18 decrease in your taxes. 23, 24, mill rate would drop again to 9.33, and that would be a drop of $41. 24, 25, drop again to 9.12, and it would be a lower tax bill of $62. So if those mill rates, everything hold true, the total cost of the 3-year referendum would be minus $121, again, from our current referendum. I do want to, the last bullet point, and this is very important. The board can choose to levy from 0 up to 900,000. We cannot, the law says you can't levy more than 900,000. So the reason I bring that up is we have in our history 3 times under levied. So let's say you have a great budget year, again, based on great weather, the utilities and other factors, that instead of in 22, 23 levying 900, they could levy 800 or 700, depending on where the budget sits. And a lot of it's going to depend too what happens in the biennium budget going forward, the state biennium budget. But that is very important to know that the levy, just because we say 900,000 doesn't mean that the board has to levy the total amount. Next. So our referendum history, I can't say enough and thank the community enough for the support that you have given our district. So back in 2018, when we ran the 3-year referendum, yeses were 1,020, noes 705, so 59%. I won't go through each of them, but you can see the yes and no votes. Again, there's been strong support for the referendums. And so 2016, 63% voted for referendum, 2013, 60%, 2010, 64%, 2007, 75%. One of the big reasons is there was 2 referendums. There was actually an operating referendum and elementary renovation. So generally building projects receive honestly more support and get more people out in terms of voting. Next, John. So if the referendum fails, the cuts in program services, staffing, and maintenance would have to happen. There's just no way around it. As I said, the second bullet point, 75% of operations are tied to staffing, salaries, and benefits. I mentioned again the open enrollment. Years past, it was just February through April. So, but now that is not the case. So again, if there are cuts and parents and families, students don't like it, any time between July on, they can do what's an open enrollment exception app and leave the district. Next point, loss of students due to fewer offerings and less programming. That will happen. I can assure you, I was in a school district where our referendum failed and we lost students. Second last, additional loss in state aid due to referendum loss. One of the interesting things about school finance is the less you spend, the less the aid you get. So if you say, well, we simply have to cut spending, we have to cut spending, and you will have to for referendum, but it's a double-edged sword because of the fact then you will also lose state aid. And then again, the last thing is state aid is based on enrollment and spending. So if your enrollment's going down, that's not good. And as I said, spending, it's a negative effect on there. next one. So just about done. So as you decide, these are things I want to point out. No matter your thoughts and feelings on the referendum, you have a voice and a vote. So I really, really, really want to emphasize, become educated about the referendum. There's information on our website. Please look through it. Again, as I said, the PowerPoint and this presentation will be on there tomorrow. So look through that and educate yourself, and then vote. Please vote on April 6th. And I've covered that. Know your facts and vote accordingly. Questions asked: if a referendum fails, can we keep and attract students? Can we attract new families into our community? I believe that we are attracting new families into our community when you see our developments filling up, and I know that families still want a small school and are attracted to that. So can we attract new families into our community? I'm proud of what we've accomplished in our schools in terms of academics and all of the other auxiliary programs that go with it. So can we maintain those schools if we don't pass a referendum? What type of school do we want for our kids? Do we want to be able to have them have options so they can, whether, and I'm not just calling it academically, I'm saying on all programs, whether they're into art, music, sports, et cetera, we want to give kids options. The public school is the center of the community. And that's, in any community, especially smaller communities, it is the center. So as you vote, think about our kids, our school, and our community. And obviously, we are very, very proud of our school. And again, Bangor pride, a small school building big futures. So please vote. Next one. I pointed out again about the PowerPoint, and the YouTube will be on the website tomorrow. Please vote on April 6th. And I want to say thank you for those few people in attendance in person, but also on YouTube. And again, I will ask that people that, if they have questions, please email me, call me, look at the website to get information, and then make your vote count on April 6th. So thank you. And now we'll open it up to questions.
John, do we have any questions from our online listeners?
I always like to say I blinded you with brilliance, or was a lot of numbers. Okay, no way. So again, please, there's now about 2 weeks between now and the referendum vote. I encourage you to please, and I said, call me, email me, stop in, please. I'd be glad to sit down with you and share information, because I know this was a ton of information, and so I'd be glad to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So we have a couple items on the agenda. Rescind the approval of the April 8th early release for staff COVID clinic for the second vaccination. Mr. Lane?
Yes, can I explain that, Julie? Originally, when we set up the clinic, and I do want to let you know that the first dose went extremely well. They unbelievably fast, and I can tell you that our staff was so grateful. I heard many thank yous for setting that up. So originally, when we had set it up, there was 3 weeks between the first and the second dose. The first dose was on Thursday. And then, so 3 weeks would have been Thursday, April 8th, and that's what we voted on. But there was a concern, especially, you know, on the staff, that what if you get sick and everything. So I did talk to the manager who was here that day, and I said, is there any way that we could change this to Friday, which would allow then we do the early release, but if staff weren't feeling well, they were able to go home, rest, and be back for Monday. Again, with a shortage of subs, I know Rick and Mike very nervous what that Friday would bring. So I'm asking for, first of all, action to rescind the early release on April 8th, and then a separate item to vote for the early release on April 9th. So thanks, Julie.
I'll move to approve the rescission of the earlier approval for April 8th early release.
I'll second.
Motion made by Joni, seconded by Lori to rescind the approval of the April 8th early release for staff COVID clinic for second vaccination. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
I'll also move to approve the new date of April 9th for early release at 1 p.m. for staff COVID clinic.
Second.
Motion made by Joni, seconded by Paul to approve the April 9th early release at 1 p.m. for staff COVID clinic for the second vaccination. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. I ask for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Paul, seconded by Lori to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.